Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really going to get into just one chapter, but it's incredibly packed. John chapter 6.
Yeah, it's a big one.
It is. And our mission really is to explore not just the story, the events, but to dig into the deeper meanings, the teachings, the reactions people had. It gets pretty intense.
It definitely does. It takes you on quite a ride, doesn't it? You've got these huge public miracles, and then almost immediately, these teachings that are, well, they're really challenging. They force people to choose.
Exactly. So let's start. We're just across the Sea of Galilee, huge crowd, drawn by Jesus' signs. What does the text actually say was their motivation? Why are they all there?
It's pretty direct about it. It says they were following because they'd seen the signs he'd performed on the sick.
Ah, okay. So it's focused on the physical benefits, the healing, the
There you
sort of
go.
visible power.
What they could see and, what they could potentially gain from it physically.
So Jesus goes up a mountainside with his disciples, sees this massive crowd coming, and he asks Philip, where can we buy bread for these people? Seems like a practical question, but there's a catch, isn't there?
Yeah, the text adds that crucial detail. He only asked this to test Philip. Jesus already knew what he was going to do.
Right. So it wasn't about logistics for him. It was a teaching moment, maybe, for the disciples.
Seems like it. And Phil, well, he answers from a totally human viewpoint.
No, completely. He does the math, says, even 8 months' wages wouldn't be enough for everyone to get even a tiny bit.
Just pure practical impossibility. That's what Philip sees.
Then Andrew pipes up. He mentions a boy who has 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish.
Yeah, but even Andrew immediately adds, but how far will they go among so many? Still stuck on the scarcity. Still thinking in purely human terms.
And Jesus just kind of bypasses all that calculation and doubt. He simply says, have the people sit down.
And we're told there were about 5,000 men, plus, probably women and children too. A huge number.
They all sit down on the grass. And then the miracle happens.
He takes that tiny amount of food, the loaves and fish, gives thanks, and then starts distributing it. And everyone eats. Not just a little bit, but as much as they wanted.
As much as they wanted. And the detail about the leftovers is amazing.
12 baskets full. It's just overflowing abundance coming out of almost nothing. A really dramatic sign.
It really is. And the crowd sees this. What's their immediate takeaway?
They jump to a conclusion. Surely this is the prophet who is to come into the world.
What does that tell us about how they interpreted the sign?
Well, it suggests they're seeing it through maybe a political lens, a nationalistic one. They see someone who can provide maybe a potential king or leader who can solve their problems.
Right, because their next move is trying to make him king by force.
Exactly. They want to seize him. They're thinking about a worldly kingdom, a leader for their immediate physical needs.
So Jesus, knowing what they're planning, slips away, heads back to the mountain alone.
And while that's happening, evening comes, and the disciples get into their boat to head back across towards Capernaum without him.
Okay, so the scene shifts. Now we're with the disciples on the water.
Yeah, it gets dark. The wind picks up. The sea gets rough. They're rowing, really struggling against the storm.
They're maybe 3 or 4 miles out, fighting the waves, and then they see him.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Walking on the water, coming towards them.
Can you imagine their reaction is just terror?
Understandably. But his voice cuts through it all. It is I. Don't be afraid.
Just those words. There's another interesting detail here, isn't there, about when they let him into the boat.
Yes. As soon as they were willing to take him in, the text says they immediately reached the shore where they were heading.
Wow. So the struggle just ends. The storm, the distance, it's all overcome in that moment he enters the boat.
It's another incredible display of power, isn't it? First, power over scarcity with the food. Now power over the elements, over nature itself.
Yeah. But as powerful as these signs are, it seems like people snap back pretty quickly to focusing on the surface level stuff.
That becomes really clear the very next day.
Yeah.
The crowd that was left behind, they realized Jesus didn't leave with the disciples.
So they find other boats and cross over to Capernaum, specifically looking for him.
And when they find him, their first question is pure logistics. Rabbi, when did you get here?
They're focused on the how. How did he travel?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
Jesus, well, he doesn't even answer that question directly, does he? He goes straight to their motive.
Right. He says, you are looking for me not because you saw the signs, but because you ate the loaves and had your fill.
He just lays it bare. Their driving force wasn't the spiritual meaning of the miracle. It was the free meal, the physical satisfaction.
Oh, yeah. And he immediately challenges them, pushes them towards something else.
He does. Do not work for food that spoils, but for food that endures to eternal life,
Hmm.
which the Son of Man will give you.
He's setting up a contrast. Spoiling food versus eternal food. Earthly work versus something else.
A completely different kind of work and a different kind of reward. And the crowd, they respond by asking, okay, so what works must we do? What does God require?
Still thinking in terms of actions, right? Religious duties, maybe. Things they need to perform.
Seems like it. But Jesus simplifies it dramatically. He pivots from their works to God's work.
He says the work of God is this: to believe in the one he has sent.
Belief, that's the core requirement.
Right.
Not a list of tasks, but trust in him.
But they don't seem quite ready for that shift. What do they ask for next?
They immediately ask for another sign. It's almost like, okay, prove it. They even bring up the manna in the desert.
Right. Our ancestors ate manna. Moses gave them bread from heaven. What sign will you give so we can believe?
It's a direct challenge. Essentially, top that miracle if you want us to believe you're from God.
And Jesus, he corrects their history a bit, doesn't he, about the manna?
He does. He says it wasn't really Moses who gave the bread from heaven, it was his father. And his father gives the true bread from heaven.
Okay, so he's distinguishing between the historical manna and something else. Something true.
Exactly. And then he drops the first really big statement. For the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world.
Whoa. So the true bread isn't a thing, it's a person. He who comes down from heaven.
Precisely. He's identifying himself with this life-giving bread from heaven.
How does the crowd react to that?
Well, their initial response sounds okay on the surface.
Mm-hmm.
Sir, from now on, give us this bread.
It still sounds like they're asking for a handout, doesn't it? Like the loaves and fishes, just
Yeah.
a better version.
It does feel like they might still be missing the depth of what he's claiming about his identity. They want the product, maybe not the person.
And that's when he makes it absolutely explicit.
Yep, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me will never go hungry, and he who believes in me will never be thirsty.
He directly connects himself, coming to him, believing in him, with satisfying that ultimate hunger and thirst.
It's a massive claim.
Yeah.
And he points out the disconnect. They've seen him, they've seen the signs, but they still haven't truly believed in the way he means.
He talks about being sent by the Father and the Father's will. What's the connection there?
He connects it to eternal life. The Father's will is that everyone who looks to the Son and believes in him should have eternal life, and he will raise them up on the last day.
So this food that endures to eternal life is directly tied to belief in him and ultimately resurrection.
Yes, it's all bound up in who he is and his relationship with the Father. It's not just about sustaining physical life anymore. It's about eternal life.
Okay, so this is where things start to get really difficult for the listeners.
Definitely. The text says the Jews began to grumble because he said, I am the bread that came down from heaven.
And their objection is very grounded, isn't it?
Very. They're saying, wait a minute, isn't this Jesus, Joseph's son? We know his father and mother. How can he possibly say he came down from heaven?
They're stuck on his human origins. They can't square that with this divine claim.
Exactly. Their frame of reference just can't compute it. And Jesus, hearing their grumbling, basically says that belief isn't just a human decision. It involves the Father drawing people.
Right. He connects coming to him with being taught by God, drawn by the Father.
Mm-hmm. And then he doubles down. He repeats, I am the bread of life. And he contrasts it sharply with the manna again.
What's the contrast he makes?
He says their ancestors ate the manna, that supposed bread from heaven, and yet they died. It didn't give lasting life.
But this bread, the one he is.
If anyone eats of this bread, he says, they will live forever.
Okay. And then comes maybe the most challenging part of the whole discourse.
Yeah, this is where it gets incredibly intense, symbolically and frankly kind of shocking for the listeners. He declares, this bread is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world.
He connects the bread directly to his own body, his flesh, and links it to a future giving, a sacrifice for the world's life.
The reaction is immediate. The text says they started arguing sharply among themselves. How can this man give us his flesh to eat?
You can just feel the confusion, the offense maybe.
Yeah.
It sounds cannibalistic, especially given Jewish dietary laws and prohibitions about blood.
Absolutely. It's a profoundly difficult statement on multiple levels.
Yeah.
And Jesus doesn't back down or soften it.
No, he actually intensifies it, doesn't he?
He really does. He says, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you.
Wow. Eat his flesh and drink his blood. He insists it's necessary for life.
Yes, and he calls his flesh real food and his blood real drink. He says that doing this leads to abiding in him and him in the person. It's about a deep, intimate, life-sustaining union.
Not just agreeing with ideas, but some kind of fundamental connection.
Exactly. A transformative participation,
Hmm.
not just intellectual assent.
And the setting for this is significant too, right? He's saying this in the synagogue in Capernaum.
Yeah, so the audience likely includes people who are religiously serious, familiar with the scriptures, not just the casual crowd from the feeding.
And what's the impact on them, even on his closer followers?
It's massive. The text explicitly says that many of his disciples, people who had been following him, not just the objectors, heard this and said, "This is a hard teaching. Who can accept it?"
Not just confusing, but hard. Offensive, maybe? Difficult to stomach?
Scandalous, perhaps?
Hmm.
And Jesus, knowing they're grumbling about it, challenges them directly. Does this offend you? He even hints at something future. What if you see the Son of Man ascend? Maybe suggesting that event would shed more light.
And he gives a kind of interpretive key, doesn't he?
He does. He says, "The Spirit gives life. The flesh counts for nothing. The words I have spoken to you are spirit, and they are life."
That seems crucial. It points away from a literal physical act towards the spiritual reality his words convey. The life comes from the Spirit through his words.
It strongly suggests that eating and drinking is about receiving him, his life, his teachings, his sacrifice, spiritually, through faith, empowered by the Spirit.
But even with that explanation, it's still too much for many.
Yeah, the text is really stark. From this time, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him.
Wow. So this teaching really functioned as a dividing line, a filter.
It absolutely did. It separated those who were just looking for signs and benefits from those willing to grapple with the deeper, much more demanding claims about who he was and what following him really meant.
So facing this mass departure, Jesus turns to his inner circle, the 12.
And asks that really poignant question. You do not want to leave too, do you?
Just lays it out there. Are you staying?
And Simon Peter answers for them. It's such a defining moment.
What does he say?
"Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life."
So even if they don't fully grasp the eating flesh and drinking blood part yet.
Exactly. They recognize something essential and unique in him. He possesses the very words that lead to eternal life. Their commitment isn't based on fully understanding every hard teaching at that moment.
It's based on who they believe he is.
Right. Peter follows up with, "We believe and know that you are the Holy One of God." Their faith is in his identity, even amidst confusing or difficult teachings.
That's a powerful contrast to those who walked away because the teaching was too hard.
It really is. But then, immediately after Peter's great confession, Jesus adds another complex layer.
Oh, what's that?
He points out that even within that chosen 12, one of them doesn't truly believe and is, in fact, destined to betray him, referring to Judas.
Goodness. So even within the most loyal group, the response isn't uniform. Belief and unbelief exist side by side, even there.
It's a stark reminder of the complexity of faith and response.
Wow. Okay, this chapter really does cover an incredible amount of ground. You go from this massive popular miracle, the feeding,
Right across the lake through that terrifying storm and the walking on water.
and then land in Capernaum for this incredibly intense, challenging dialogue about the bread of life that causes this huge split.
Yeah, summing it up, we've really seen that stark contrast Jesus draws between seeking physical stuff, like the loaves, and the need for real spiritual sustenance.
And we've delved into those pretty radical claims he makes about himself being the true bread coming down from heaven.
And that really difficult symbolic language about eating his flesh and drinking his blood being necessary for life and for abiding in him.
We definitely saw the friction that created the grumbling, people calling it a hard teaching, and the consequences.
Absolutely. The clear division it caused, many followers just couldn't accept it and left. But then you have the 12.
Their response through Peter was so different, sticking with him because, despite the difficulty, they recognized he had the words of eternal life.
It really highlights these timeless questions, doesn't it? Even though it's an ancient text, it makes you think about belief today. How do we react when faced with challenging ideas? What does it really mean to follow someone who makes claims like offering eternal life?
Yeah, and maybe something to reflect on is that whole spectrum of reactions we see just in this one chapter. You've got awe after the feeding, leading to attempts to grab power. You have fear on the lake. You have the crowd demanding more physical signs. Then the grumbling, the confusion, the offense over his identity and words. Then large numbers just walking away. And finally, that core group clinging to him, believing he's the Holy One of God.
Quite a range.
It really is. What does that huge variety of human responses tell us about what happens when we encounter teachings, or maybe even truths, that demand something really profound from us? Something that might require us to change how we see everything. Definitely something to mull over.